Oh, who has a metal box? Raise your hands. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. So here's what happens. That it is a ton more weight. It rusts. You got to paint it, and it's going to depreciate your assets. So I'm going to try and get Eloquip as a sponsor because I'm their world's greatest salesman. The problem is they can't keep up with the demand that I am going to feed them. Aluminum beats metal all day long if you want high resale. If you're buying to save, buy metal. Okay, equipment math. So I think the gentleman over there was asking me about, like, how do I make purchasing decisions? Well, we use math, right? You can test scenarios mathematically. Is this better or worse? If I buy it for this much and I can sell it for this much after this many years, and the interest in inflation is this much, do I make more money if I sell it in 5 years or 4 years or 3 years? And what are the repairs? So I'm testing scenarios on paper or computer rather than trial and error and experience. The math will tell me what I should buy and what I should sell. So I'm not worried about the price. I'm worried about my ROI. What's it costing me to operate this thing? And at the end of the day, how much better off am I going to be? And you can test that mathematically. Now, there are some other factors that go into this, like brand, okay? So don't buy a brand that there isn't any service for in your area, because that's not going to help you, okay? And equipment is a mechanical employee, so we want a lot of equipment. That is for sure. We want less people and more equipment. I'd rather see a higher equipment ratio and a lower labor ratio because they give you less headaches. And you can kick them and fire them, so with no excuse. So this is an example of a spreadsheet that we have that we use in our consulting, where you can actually list all your equipment and then do these calculations to find out what your recovery costs are. We can even do it by season. So if you're doing snow and summer, what's the cost of that idle equipment sitting there? It's all math, right? You just plug in the numbers and away you go. For pricing purposes, you should not use used equipment. You should use new equipment as the value for estimating. And Peter talked about the balance sheet earlier. Let's circle back. So I've got this company, and I look at the person's fleet, and I'm like, wow, that's old. That's old. Yes, I have no. So the advantage is you have no cash flow issues, right? If it's all paid for. The problem is you're going to have high repairs. And if I want to buy your business and I see that museum piece over there, actually the fleet of the museum pieces, I'm just going to just sell your assets. What do you mean you don't want them? No, I don't want them. I'm going to get all new. Because I was pricing with all new equipment anyway. Because there's a cost. Depreciation represents what the government wants. They want their pound of flesh. ROI factors for not only how much it's worth less, but the future costs that I have to pay for it. So you have to save enough money to not only cover for the depreciation, right, taking the thing from like 100,000 to zero, but also for now, 10 years later, the thing's 200,000. So you got to charge your equipment out at the rate at which factors for the depreciation and also the future replacement cost, plus the inflation. Your true operating cost is essentially your cost that you purchased minus what you're going to sell it for and all those costs, okay? So you can test these things mathematically. How many of you buy pickup trucks in the season you need them? Don't be shy. Raise your hands here. Come on. Up high. Hold them. Be proud. Don't be proud. I was just playing with you. So the fact of the matter is that you should be buying your equipment a year to 2 years in advance. You should know what you're buying and why. A, you're going to get a better deal. B, you can order exactly what you want with every spec dialed in. And C, you won't have to settle for what's on the lot. How many of you settle? Don't raise your hands. I don't want to know. Okay? So we have a tool where you can actually just pop in a bunch of different vehicles and compare vehicle A to vehicle B. So one of the companies that I'm helping in Pennsylvania, what I did with them is I said, okay, F-150 or Ford, what's that new one? Maverick. And so the issue was, well, there was a pride issue. Well, you know, Ford F-150. I'm like, okay, well, let's do the math on how much difference that's going to be over 5 years. Do I need the? No, I don't. Okay, so you don't need it. Or you give it to one of your employees to whip her? Yes. Okay, well, that's $28,000 savings in 4 years. If you only look at the 1 year savings, you won't think about it. You think about it over 4 years, you take that over 10 years, you start to think different, right? So in terms of your thinking, there's what I call CEO thinking. So CEO thinking takes into consideration tangibles and intangibles. CFO is only numbers and dollars, and generally they're only thinking in a year, at least at the smaller level. When you get to the bigger level, it's different, okay? So we need to have a CEO thinking operations, thinking finance, thinking human resources. What's the optimal decision for our businesses? Most of us here are tactical. We react. There's two types of tactics. One tactic is essentially an opportunity. I'm going to jump on that. Sometimes we shouldn't chase that opportunity. And the other tactic is the defensive play. Oh my God, I need a truck. I got a last minute, right? And then you settle. And that's what happens. So if we can move you guys to strategic thinking, you're going to be way better business people. What do you think the biggest difference between amazing business people and mediocre business people is? Planning. Planning. And you get your when right. So your when is long term, not short term. And learning. That's why you're here, which is great. That's the difference. That is the biggest difference that I see. There's another layer. I'm going to go on a quick digression with you. How many of you have taken a psych profile before? Raise your hands. Hold them up. Okay. So some of you are optimized for analytical thinking. Some of you aren't. That's okay. So what you need is you need somebody on your team who's an analytical thinker. Because if you're not, you're certainly not going to be interested in numbers, right? Who's doing that for you? Most accountants suck. So they're off the, I'll just tell you right now. When I look at people's financials, I've only seen one set of financials in my life that are any good. That's how ugly they are. It's like, what just happened? And I'm supposed to figure out what's going on from that? I have some, if you ever want to see, I can show you they're like train wrecks. It's like, that's how I look at financials. Whew! Terrible. My goodness. We're going to try and salvage the engine out of that crushed front end. Good luck with that. Get the jaws of life. So, numbers are very important. You can test scenarios virtually, not by trial and error. You can also leverage other people's experience, right? That's huge too. So this is like, how do I charge my equipment out per day? Like, what do I know how much do I have to charge? Great question, right? So a lot of you guys, how many people here know about the different types of overhead recovery? How to recover overhead properly? Raise your hands. Ish? Okay. Well, there's 4 ways to recover overhead. Number 1 is SOAR, single overhead recovery, right? So essentially you take your overhead and you add it to whatever the cost of whatever you're doing is, and you add the profit and you end up with a price. That's one. One is called multiple overhead recovery. You take your overhead and you distribute the overhead between labor, subs, and equipment, okay, and materials, and you around different ratios, and the balance goes to the labor. Now, the reason you would do that is, let's say you wanted to sell, okay, here's a great example. I've got to do that walkway, and it's $1,000, and I mark it up $300. Does anybody care? No. If I go to $1 million and I mark up my trade 30%, I'm going to lose the job because it's $300,000 for doing nothing if they're a good sub-trade. Got it? So single overhead recovery, as you get bigger, can kill you. Okay? Same thing with the equipment. How do I mark up my materials? How do I mark up my equipment? That's a strategy. So we either employ single overhead recovery or multiple overhead recovery. There's also what's called field labor overhead recovery. So for maintenance businesses, that's great. My type of business, that's great. Legal firms, accounting firms, they're in the business of selling hours. So are all of your businesses. I don't care how custom you are. But the fact of the matter is the numbers matter. And how you strategize to achieve your aim is going to have a huge impact on whether or not you're going to be successful. So we have calculators to help you figure out how much should I charge for that truck based on my costs and numbers. Remember, all of you are different. Watch this. Your company, you were born genetically superior. Your dad beat you as a child, and you are the best mason, and your brothers are all the best masons, and there's no other option in life. You're going to be a mason, and your daddy's were masons, okay? And there's no talking. Like, if you do something wrong, you get yelled at, and you just go. and you go all day long and you pride yourself in how long you work, right? And then we come to the millennials or Generation X. Well, I'd like to learn the experience and this and that. So different. Your daddy's super rich. He's connected. He gets the good contracts. Boom. I'm in a small town. Daddy owns everything. Huh. I'm exceptionally good looking with a great accent. Huh. Right? So all these things will influence how successful you are. Does that make sense? You know what? I'm really good with numbers, or I'm really crafty. Those are all useful skills. I'm crazy strategic, right? Oh, by the way, I own 10 properties and all my employees live there, so now I've got an income stream from my employees that are living in my properties. You see how this works. So no two companies are the same, okay? So you can't compare companies. It's only your company. You just got to be better than you were yesterday. Do not compare companies. Yes, it's somewhat useful. I can give you an idea whether you're spending stupidly. So if I look at your financials, you're insane. Why are you spending that much on insurance? This company's cheaper. Why are you spending that much on your account? What do they do for you? That's terrible. You're spending that much on that consultant. What do they do for you? Right? So super important.